What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another YouTube video. I'm Garrett Albert and I am just spreading some fishing knowledge around the world and to everybody who loves it just as much as I do. It is currently like 10 degrees, it feels like, outside, and everything's iced over and you can't get out and fish and you can't do anything. So I'm just going to go over some of the baits that I love to use during cold water. The first bait I'm going to talk about is a jig. I have two different types of jigs. One is just a football jig with a chunk on the back, and the second one is a little finesse jig. I love both of these and I throw them in very different situations. The football jig, I normally just find some rocky points or even some muddy banks and stuff like that and just throw it out there and just slowly drag it across the rocks or points, or most of the time it's like gravel type stuff or even muddy banks, and that normally just gets bites. I just slowly drag it across until I get bites. This right here, I just have a little chunk trailer on the back of it. It's just a little zoom chunk. I'm not really sure. It's nothing fancy, nothing super expensive. And this is just a little 1/2 ounce football head jig, and it has a skirt on it. Just a black and blue, little black and blue jig. It's about all I use. Either black and blue or green pumpkin for football jigs. That's about it. And I always use normally a 1/2 ounce because it just gets down to the deep. It gets down to the depths of maybe if I'm fishing 20, 30, even up to 40 foot on some points around the lake that I mostly fish in, because it's a super deep lake. And smallmouth eat it, largemouth eat it, and it does the job very well, but it is sometimes super annoying to fish because it is so slow. And I love to fish fast, flip all the time, throw crankbaits, roll them in and stuff like that. But if you like fishing slow, and sometimes that's just the only way to get bites, is just to drag a football jig around super slow that mimics crawfish and stuff like that. With another option on the jig, I will sometimes throw just a little finesse jig, and this just has a little Guggen mini crawl on the back. And this color, I don't even know, it looks like it's like a cowboy crawl type color with some purple in it and stuff. And I just have that paired with the little mini Guggen Kraken crawl, and it has some smell, gives off some good smell and everything. And I normally I'll throw it around brush. I'll throw it on points too. And it's almost like an oversized Ned Rig. And it works really, really well for just getting some bites on those smallmouth, and even it gets some really big bites also. It won't always get as big of a bite as that I said earlier, like a football jig. It doesn't always get bites like that, because a football jig normally and generally gets the biggest bites just because it's such a big profile jig. Going on to the second type of bait that I like to throw is the swim bait. I'm a big fan of swim baits. I love throwing swim baits. And this right here is just a little 1/4 ounce jig head with a little 4-inch Kitech Easy Shiner. This is my favorite color. I love to throw just the white, and it always gets it done. I throw all these on the same type of places like rocky points, muddy banks, stuff like that. It's about all the time that I'm fishing during the winter and the cold months is just the rocky banks and rocky points, a lot of points. I try to always find the points and just hit as many points as you can, because a lot of smallmouth and largemouth will stay on those points in 20 to 30 foot of water. And even sometimes you can catch them up into the 10 foot and above. Sometimes you can fish shallow if you have a shallow lake or such, and you can even catch fish on these same lures that I'm talking about in super shallow water. But I like to use that 1/4 ounce jig head with a 4-inch Easy Shiner, and it gives off tons of action, so you just barely have to roll it in, and it kicks the whole time. And if you don't want to reel it real fast, because those fish are lethargic and aren't moving around very much, so they're not going to react and chase down a bait like they would during the summer or something when their metabolism is real high and they're just looking for an easy meal. Rolls by them, they suck it in, and you get them. They're not chasing bait down for 10, 15 yards per se. And I like to throw three different types of colors, including the white. I also like this one. This is just a little silver with a white bottom, and it has a bunch of different types of flake, like purple and gold in it. And then I also like to use this one right here, and it is just a, they're all kind of like the same type. They're a shad pattern, of course. But this one's green with silver on the bottom, and it has just like green and gold and black flake. The third bait I'm going to talk about is just a simple crankbait. This right here is a DT6, and I love throwing Rapala's DT series. They're just about the best crankbaits that I possibly use. I love to use red during the winter. I love to use, like, it's called the demon color of the DT6 all the way up to a DT14. I use all these on the same areas that I'm going to throw everything else. But a crankbait is one of my favorite things. The DT series, I like balsa type baits. Rapala makes some of the best hard baits there is across the country, and everything. I mean, Rapala, that's why they've been around so long, because they make some of the best hard baits, and these type of crankbaits. The DT series is by far my favorite. I love this color right here. This is just a little shad pattern, and I also love to throw the demon color, which is a red crawl color. The fourth bait that I like to use during the winter months when the water is between 40 to 50 degrees, normally around like that 45 to 43 degree water temp, is a jerk bait. I love to throw jerk baits, and they get bites pretty much anywhere. If you're struggling and having a hard day, pick up a jerk bait, sling it around all day, and I promise you, you will catch some fish. These are also Rapala hard baits. Their jerk baits are just about the best that I've ever used. I've used many companies, and I've never found one that swims or has the action of a Rapala. This is the Rapala Rip Stop Deep. This goes up to 12 feet, and if you throw it on 10 or 8 pound test, you can get it down to the 14 to 15 foot range. And then this right here is just the Rapala Rip Stop 9 foot. This is a lot smaller type bait, and if you throw it on 8 or 10 pound test, you can get it down into the 12, 13 foot range if you're making super long cast and then jerking it back. This one right here is small. It's, I mean, not very big at all. It's probably about, say, 3.5, 4 inches. And then this one right here is like a 6 to 7 inch bait with the bill and all. They have sticky, very, very sticky treble hooks. So if a fish comes by and just swipes at it, you're more than likely gonna hook it. My number one wintertime bait is this right here. This is a simple little Ned Rig. The Ned Rig is by far the best wintertime bait in my opinion. The Ned Rig is just a fantastic bait. I'm using a little Z-Man. This is just Z-Man, the Elastec, and this color is the Canada Crawl, and I'm using a Mustad little lock type Ned head. It's got the little lock, as you can tell right there, that little silver part, and that helps the Z-Man Ned Rig plastic stay on excellent. But all you do with this is literally throw it out there, let it sit, and barely drag it across anything, structure, I mean, rock, structure, mud, anything, and it always gets bit. I mean, always. This is by far my favorite wintertime bait. And if I'm going out in the winter, I always have 1 or maybe 2 of these tied on at all times. It just, something about it, it's kind of crazy, but it always gets bit. It is probably the dumbest looking lure, and it just somehow gets bit all the time. It will outfish in the winter. It will outfish every lure, hands down, no matter what. The Z-Man Elastec, they're amazing baits because you can catch multiple fish on one bait, and I rarely go through 2 or 3 of these in a full day of fishing, and I have 10, 20 packs of these at home, and they last forever. I mean, I can fish with 5 packs just about all year. And the Canada Crawl is my favorite. I use a Canada Crawl, and then sometimes I'll use a California Crawl. Something about that gold flake in this just really, really helps, and with getting bites and catching fish. Now, you can catch anywhere from a 6-inch fish on a Ned Rig to a 5-pounder. I have literally caught 5-pound largemouth and 4-pound smallmouth in Tennessee on a Ned Rig. It is just crazy. Let me talk about the gear that I throw this stuff on. When I'm throwing a 1/2 ounce football head jig with a chunk on the back, I'm normally throwing it on a 7/6 heavy fast action rod with a high speed gear ratio reel. Normally I'm throwing it on a Shimano SLX or a Shimano SLX DC. They're some of my favorite reels, and you want a long rod because you want to be able to make really long casts out there so you can have the most time dragging the bait back, and you will also want that long rod so when you get a bite you can get the most leverage and pick up the most line and really set that hook into the fish. When I'm throwing a jig like the finesse jig or something like this, I normally go to a 7/3 medium heavy fast action rod with also a high speed gear ratio, just because it helps get the line in and catch up to the fish when you have 30 or 40 yards of line out. This little jig right here works perfect on, say, 12 to 15 pound test, and with football jig, I normally use anywhere from 15 if I'm fishing super clear water, all the way up to 20. 20 is about my max with a football jig. I don't like to go too heavy because I just really don't think there's any need in it. My favorite rod and reel for the little 4-inch swim bait with a 1/4 ounce head is also a 7/3 medium heavy. I'm normally using the Duckett Silverado, and I like a little bit slower gear ratio on this. I'm normally going to go like a 6.2 to 1 or a 7.2 to 1 because I just don't want to burn that. I want to keep that bait down in the strike zone and really just slow roll it past those fish that are down on the points and stuff. And if you have a high speed gear ratio, you won't even realize it, but you'll be picking that bait up. You'll be picking the bait up through the water column, and you'll never be in the fish's strike zone. But I like to use a 7/3 medium heavy. The 7/3 medium heavy really gets that hook into the bait. It's an open hook bait, so you really don't have to set the hook too hard, but it just helps. And I like that 7/3 for making that long cast, because I really like to make a long cast with this, same as the jigs, so you can just get the most time in the strike zone. The setup I'm usually using for a jerkbait, these Rapalas right here, is a 7/3 medium heavy fast action. I also like to use the 7/3 medium heavy just because it's probably the most versatile. It's probably the most versatile rod, and you don't really need a completely new setup to just throw a jerkbait. I know most guys like to throw a jerkbait on like a 6'9" or 7 foot medium fast action, but you can use a 7/3 medium heavy and get by with it just as easy, and I've never lost fish on a 7/3 medium heavy. So that is what I like to use. I normally am using 8 to 12 pound line depending on how clear the water is and how deep I want that bait to go. If I'm throwing this bait around like gravel points and stuff like that in super clear water, then I'm going to want to use like 8 or 10 pound line. But if I'm throwing it around super big trees and stuff like that, that's going to be harder to pull the fish out and stuff, and even just the fish running up against a log and cutting your line off, then I'm going to want to step up to 12. And sometimes if I'm fishing around super strong structure, I'll even go up to 14 pound tests, which is kind of crazy, but it helps really just, you don't have to worry about breaking off on that fish, and you can horse the fish out of the structure. When I'm throwing the Rapala DT series crankbait around, I'm normally using a 7 foot medium action with a moderate tip on it. That moderate tip really helps you get those trebles into the fish. I have a fast trigger finger when I'm fishing, and if I feel any type of bite, I'm normally jerking the hook very quickly, and that moderate action rod really lets me get these trebles into the fish and not jerk it out of its mouth. I'm normally using just a 7 foot rod because I can make plenty long casts with a 7 foot rod, and I can get in around tight cover and stuff like that, because sometimes I'll throw these shad crankbaits around structure and stuff like that. I'm normally using 10 pound line on these crankbaits right here, something about 10 pound. It's just perfect for me, and I love to use 10 pounds. Sometimes I'll go to 12 if I'm fishing around a lot of structure, but not normally. And then very, very rarely I will go to 8 pound. I'm normally using fluorocarbon on all these setups that I've talked about. The fluorocarbon is just probably some of the best line that you're going to get because it has no stretch. The setup I like to use for a Ned Rig is just a 7 foot medium fast action spinning rod. I like to use, this is the only setup I'm using a spinning rod on. I normally use just 7 foot with a 2500 size reel. I normally have 15-pound braid to a 8 to 12 pound leader, fluorocarbon leader, and it really just gets the job done. Like I said before, the Ned Rig is my favorite bait to throw, and it always catches very good fish for me. That medium action rod lets you get those hooks into the bait plenty strong, but it also lets you be able to feel and play the fish because you are only using normally 8 to 10 pound line. And if you have a really big smallmouth or something, as you guys know, 8 to 10 pound line, a smallmouth can break that instantly. But that's the setups I like to use for most of all these 5 wintertime baits. If you have any questions, feel free to comment. I will try to leave a link to all this stuff that I talked about in the description, and as well as the rods and reels that I use for most of these setups, and the line too. And if you like the video, please feel free to subscribe and leave a like on this video. I am hoping to be able to get out sometime and do some fishing, but currently there's an ice storm pretty much all across America, it seems like, and in Tennessee it is super cold and everything's icing up, and I really just don't want to go out there when it is 10 degrees and freeze. So thanks for watching, and peace out.